Robbie, you collecting these? Looks like.
Thompson, yeah.
No, you didn't need this.
Yeah. Low rider. That's her fault.
I want a copy of Dan's at the time, but he said he sent it from us. Chili just turned very good. Casey just turned very good.
So that's everybody's.
Okay.
But
Well, Marty, I figured you're going to use the same. Whatever you get last year.
and then I'll copy all of them. Send them all out.
Reinvent the wheel. Normally I'm not here anyway.
Yeah, this is the first time.
Well, I'll be leaving later. This year I'm going down last week of March. First week of April. I only won't be here the first meeting of April.
I won't be here the second one of March, I already told you.
Sorry, I'll be here. When did you get back on?
Saturday night, or Saturday evening.
I'm gonna tell you, you go on any more cruises out of Fort Lauderdale? I don't know when you fly in there, but we spend the night before just in case. The hotel. But we took an Uber into that, there's a restaurant down there. Cuban. I don't know why they call it Versailles.
Well,
It's Cuban.
there was a-
It is.
There's a little cute, we stayed at the Holiday Inn Express, south of the airport. Because they have a free shuttle.
We had Hampton.
It's a Cuban place.
They're not here.
Sorry. We're gonna have a hearing today.
It's almost an hour ride down to this restaurant.
We'll have a hearing. Public board. And I'll talk about it, probably some member of that.
Fantastic.
Horn. It's 5 o'clock, actually 5:01 by my watch. That clock's actually right tonight. That's a change. Is it right twice a day? Do what? Every clock's right twice a day. Yeah, you're right. You're right, at least. Call this study session to order. We will have the end of Pastor Weston Wildenour. You'll give us our invocation. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Let us pray. Dear God, Heavenly Father, on this day when we remember all the wonderful presidents that you put in power and positions of leadership, we thank you for all the leaders that you have given here to the city of Cape Girardeau. And we ask that you continue to guide them with your wisdom, with your grace, and help them to do what's best for all of the people that are living here in Cape Girardeau, and then what's best for the city. Lord, guide the discussions that are had tonight, and help everybody to have a wisdom and understanding to follow your will and to serve those who are around them. We pray this all in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to our February 18th meeting. We have two presentations this evening. The first is an annual audit report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. That's fine.
Jeff. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here to talk about the audit report. I will try to be brief, even though if I get a podium and a microphone and get a chance to talk about government finances, sometimes I get a little windy. For those of you who have heard me talk about the audit report before, you're going to find this to be very repetitive and very routine. So that's why I'll try to make this fairly quick for you. I really only have one thing that's new this year that I want to talk to you about. As you know, we issue 3 reports on your financial statements. The first report explains that management of the city is responsible for the financial statements, and my job as the auditor is to give an opinion on whether or not they're fairly stated in accordance with governmental generally accepted accounting principles. It is our opinion that these financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That sentence right there is what makes it a clean opinion. It's an unmodified opinion. That's the one you want to get. It explains that there's a lot of additional information in this bound document that you have. Some of it we've extended our procedures and we also express an opinion on. Some of it is specific information as was provided by your pension plan administrators. Some was written by the city. And some of those things, our opinion doesn't actually extend to that information, but we have reviewed that information and found it to be consistent with the city's financial statements and found no reason to call attention to it other than that. The second report that we issue has to do with the city's internal controls over how they accumulate and gather financial information to be able to prepare financial statements, and also in the city's compliance. We found no instances of deficiencies in the city's internal controls that we would consider to be reportable conditions. We also found no instances of non-compliance with laws and regulations, contracts, grant agreements, things with a financial nature. We found no instances of non-compliance that need to be reported either. So that's the second report. The third report has to do with the city's use of federal government monies. Whenever you spend more than $750,000 worth of federal grant money, the federal government requires an additional layer of audit that's applied just to your federal expenditures. They require me to test major programs, and your major programs for this year were your MoDOT Airport Improvement Program and your Assistance for Firefighters grants. The Airport Improvement Program spent almost $1.4 million in federal expenditures, and there were $880,000 worth of expenditures under the Assistance for Firefighters grants. For each of those grants, we have about 14 specific compliance requirements that the federal government wants me to test for. They want me to give an opinion on whether or not you complied with those. So we issued another unmodified opinion that explains that we found the city to be in compliance with all of the requirements that they wanted me to test for those grants. So in addition to your compliance, they also want me to report on whether or not you have internal controls in place to ensure that you will be in compliance with their requirements. So we don't comply just because we got lucky. We specifically have things that we do to make sure that we're going to comply. So we also found no deficiencies in the internal controls over how those monies are spent. So again, that's the third unmodified opinion. That's the clean opinion, the one you want to get. I normally don't spend a lot of time going over your financial statements with you because I know at this point you've already seen your financial statements, you know what's in there. What I generally like to explain or pass on to you is whether or not we recommended significant adjustments to those financial statements to be able to put a clean opinion on them. You know, if you're relying on these financial statements to make decisions and you find out after the audit's done that we made significant adjustments to them, then that means that the numbers you were relying on weren't exactly accurate. So I am pleased to report that we made hardly any suggestions for adjustments to these financial statements. These are pretty much the financial statements we were given to start the audit with. So I think that's a very good thing that I'm happy to be able to tell you about. There's one new thing that we have in your financial statements this year. There's a new rule that went into effect. This is the first year it's effective for the city of Cape. In years past, you've got a commitment that has been reported in your financial statements in the footnotes. And this year it's required to be actually booked as a liability on your statements. And it was close to $8 million liability that you have brand new this year. The folks who make the rules on what government financial statements look like have decided that if you have other post-employment benefits that you offer to your employees, that those have to be booked as a liability. And what they consider to be an other post-employment benefit is if you allow retirees to stay on the city's health insurance plan, even if they pay for their own share of the premiums, that is a benefit that they are receiving. The theory behind it is that a retiree is usually older in age, and a person who's older in age would have to pay a little bit higher premium, theoretically, for their health insurance than a younger person would. So the idea is that if they are remaining on the insurance program, that means that the younger employees that are still here are helping subsidize part of their premium for them. And that's a benefit that they're going to receive. Hopefully all of the employees that are here now are earning that future benefit. So the idea from the people who make these rules are that now you have incurred a liability that you will have to provide to the employees someday when they retire and if they choose to participate. So the city has hired an actuary who, this is what the rules require, hired an actuary who's looked at the number of employees, ages, the likelihood of working until retirement, projected out what future salaries will be, what future estimated healthcare costs would be, how many years they would choose to remain on the insurance plan. They put all of these things into their programs, and they come up with a dollar amount that they say this is the city's liability as of June 30th. And that number now is booked as a liability on your financial statements. So like I said, this was a new rule that just went into effect for this year. So the financial statements pick up where last year left off. The first thing it did was to put this new liability on there. And then the rest of the activity is representing what actually happened during the year. So like I said, if you're looking closely at those financial statements, you'll find that that's something new. I wanted to give you kind of as quick as possible explanation of what that liability is and what it means for the city. So I was trying to talk fast. Hopefully that's the important parts of the audit report, and hopefully an explanation of, in layman's terms, of what it all means. You know, I appreciate the chance to get to do the audit for the city again. We do a lot of government auditing in our firm, and we like to think we know what we're doing. So that's why we're always glad to be able to do this type of work. One of the things that we found with the finance department, and quite honestly, when we're working with the grants, we get outside the finance department, we start bothering other people throughout the city. We found that everybody was very helpful to us, very courteous, very professional, and we really appreciate that. And that's something that we get to see on a daily basis. Don't know if you get to see it on a daily basis, so I wanted to be sure and pass that along, so you know kind of how things work from our perspective. But if anybody has any questions about the audit report itself, or if they have any questions about what we were doing or what we found, I'd be glad to try to help answer those if I could.
Yeah, that's something we don't see on a daily basis. It's refreshing to hear that went well, and that makes your job easier.
I do like to pass that on when it is the case. Some places where I go, I just keep my mouth shut at this part of the meeting. But no, I've always found that John and his department are very, very helpful, very courteous, very professional. Hopefully that's because that's the way they do things. I also realize too that sometimes the sooner you give the auditor what he wants, the sooner he goes away. That might have something.
Well, that's good too. That's good for you, so you can go do this for somebody else. But we appreciate all the time and effort that your firm puts into this, and we appreciate your expertise because not every firm does what you do. Go ahead.
I mentioned the healthcare liability being tracked under this new procedure.
Sir.
Is this specific to Missouri, or is this a federal requirement?
It's not exactly a federal requirement. It is for all reporting governments within the United States. The folks who make the rules are the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So it's not just the federal government. It's made up of people who serve with the federal government. It's made up of people who serve in cities and counties across the United States, and people with state agencies. And some members are members of the public accounting sector, like myself. So there's a good cross section of folks. In my personal opinion, sometimes a lot of the rules, they sound great in theory. I'm not sure how practical a lot of the stuff is at the local level, but supposedly it's a good cross section of all different types of users of governmental financial statements that serve on the board who make these rules.
A rule's a rule. Anybody else have any questions? Nope. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
And thanks to John and Victor and the rest of the staff. I think they do a wonderful, wonderful job gathering all the information and make sure it gets to the right place at the right time. So that's really a compliment. Doesn't always happen that way. We're very thankful.
Not only doing that, but
Every day. Oh, I know.
To earn the
It's true. That's true. Our next presentation is a 2018 crime statistics class crime-free multi-housing report.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just wanted to come in and give you an update on what our crime statistics were for this last year. Give you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that we've accomplished. Then Corporal Couch is going to give you a little small presentation on what our multi-housing, crime-free multi-housing program is. And then I'll finish up with some of the initiatives that we're going to have going forward in 2019. With that, we will get started. First, I wanted to just kind of, if you'll look up at the screen here, kind of explain to you what is a uniform crime report. I know we come and give you the statistics every year, but I don't know that we really tell you exactly what that is or what that means. So just a little brief history. Way back in my very early days of law enforcement, 1929, the federal government came up with what was a uniform crime report. And they identified 8 categories that they wanted to track across the nation and see how cities and municipalities and counties and states compared to each other through that. So they came up with 8 crimes, being homicide, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, larceny, or what we would call here in Missouri theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. And they picked those because those are crimes that pretty commonly span all the way across the nation. They're crimes that generally are more reported than another crime. You're not going to have a homicide that doesn't get reported, whereas you might have a credit card theft that doesn't get reported. Well, I guess in 1929, they didn't even have credit card thefts. But you might have a forgery that doesn't get reported or something like that. So that's why they picked those, because they're kind of the same crimes that everybody has. With that, and then there's part 2 crimes, which are everything else. And with those, they accumulate the arrest data on those, not the actual offenses. Now, we keep track of all the offenses, but as far as comparison purposes, from city to city to city, it's only the part 1 crimes that they do the comparisons on. And so with that, you will see our part 1 crimes up there at the very top. You'll see from 2017 to 2018, our part 1 crimes dropped by 3.9%. We'll let Robbie get. Robbie can't see that far, so.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
Is it possible to turn the lights down?
Would that help? And we'll be sure that a copy of this gets into y'all's inbox as well, too. Does that help you? Well, you just have to believe me what I tell you.
Sounds like a police chief, doesn't he?
Right. One of the things that we've started doing this year is, as far as our tracking, that we haven't done in years past, is we've taken this year's averages and compared it to the previous 5 years. Comparing this year to last year is good, and that tells us where we are from last year to this year, but it doesn't really give us the big broad picture of where are we trending over time. And so we've started doing that comparison, and I was actually even myself a little bit surprised when I saw that overall we're down 12.93% in our Part 1 crimes as compared to the previous 5 years. So that's really encouraging. It makes me feel like we're going in the right direction with that. Then our Part 2 crimes have decreased by 4.93% over last year, and if you look at the 5-year history, down 17%. So what that means with the combination of those two, overall crime in Cape Girardeau dropped by 4.4% over the same time period last year. And then again, looking across the 5-year period, a little over 15%. So, we're pretty proud of that. I started to have Jessica click it, and I forgot I had the thing in my hand. So one of the things that we talked about last time that I was here in front of you all was our violent crime and our gun crime, and what were we doing with that? A little bit bigger, I think you can see that one. Our violent crime over last year's dropped 17%, and our gun crime has dropped about 5%. And then our property crimes dropped a little less than 1%. And then if you look over a 5-year period, our violent crime is down about 15%, and our gun crime is actually up 12% over that 5-year period, which is one of the things we talked about last year is let's address that and try to get that knocked back down. So I'm pretty happy with the progress that we've made over the last year with that, and we'll continue to keep working on that and get that knocked down. On the violent crime, you might ask, okay, what exactly are you tallying in your violent crime numbers? And that would be our homicides, our robberies, rapes, and then assaults that resulted in a serious bodily injury. So just a simple assault isn't included in that. In the violent crime, we just include those that result in a serious injury. So our police reports. Over the last 5-year average, we were averaging about 8,700 police reports a year. This last year, we took almost 8,000, just shy of 8,000. So we're seeing that trend down. You'll notice our calls for service are increasing, though. And so I've had the question, well, how do you have your calls for service go up, but your crime is going down? Well, I think we created our own monster with that, because what we encourage the community to call us for everything. And we get out in the neighborhoods and we say, call us for anything. We're here, whatever you need, call us. So they do. And so a lot of those things that we're getting called on aren't necessarily criminal activities. They may be a welfare check on somebody's grandmother. They may live out of state and want us to go check on grandma. They could be our traffic accidents. They could be, I think the example I gave a few weeks ago were geese fighting on the pond in Kapaha Park. Really happened, really got that call. So that goes down as a calls for service for us. No geese were arrested.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So those are all types of things that lead to our calls for service. So I find that a little bit of an encouraging number. That means people are actually calling us and for things. It may not necessarily end up being a crime, but they're comfortable and they're calling us and saying, hey, can you come check this out? Another thing that I'm really proud of is that our motor vehicle accidents have decreased over the 5-year period. We were averaging 2,100 a year, and we're down to a little over 1,800 a year. A lot of that is attributable to having a crime analyst really dive into that data and say, where are we having our crashes? Where are most of these things occurring that are causing accidents? And we're able to deploy our traffic units to that and kind of get our arms wrapped around those situations and slowing people down and making the roads safer. So kudos to our traffic guys for really working on that and taking the initiative to make the road safer for us.
That's impressive because there's a lot more traffic now than there was 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
It's even more impressive.
So what all were we doing last year? Drank a lot of coffee, ate a lot of donuts, because we were doing coffee with cops, and sometimes they'd have donuts for us and trying to engage in the community. But beyond that, we were doing our street crimes task force. That's the thing where we engage with other communities, with Poplar Bluff, Sykeston, Highway Patrol, and we saturate areas and try to get a handle on some of our guys who have big warrants out for their arrest or drug dealing or what have you. We run those through the summer months. We did those again this last year. We'll continue those again next year. We also do directed patrols, which is basically the same thing, except we bring just our own staff in, and we'll hit areas that are a high crime area, or if we have a particular area that we're having an issue in, like say burglaries of vehicles are really high over a weekend in one neighborhood, we'll direct some extra patrols to that and try to tamp that down. Just fall of this last year, we started a program called Watch on Wheels, and it's a program that we started with CTA, where we went and trained their drivers on the things that we look for in crimes. So that when they're out and about driving around, I think they have over 40 vehicles on the road during the daytime hours. If they see something, they're like, oh, that's something that the police told me was a suspicious thing, I should call that in. And so we found that program still in its infancy, but it's starting to take some traction. And we'll do some more educations with them. But the flip side of that is that if we have let's say I like to use the example of a hit and run. We have a hit and run accident. We're looking for a white Buick. We'll call CTA's dispatchers and go, hey, we're looking for this white Buick. If any of your drivers are out on the road and they happen to see it, please call us. We haven't solved the crime with that yet, but we're hopeful that we will. And kind of what sparked my interest on that was we actually had a hit and run one day, and I happened to be out and about. And I got onto my iPhone, I pulled up our intersection cameras, and I was tracking the vehicle, the truck, from intersection to intersection to intersection. Of course, I was 10 minutes behind it, tracking it. But I saw it pass 2 cabs on the cameras. I'm like, oh, man, if we already had this program out, we could have called the cab company, and the cab drivers would have seen it and said, hey, your truck you're looking for just went west on Independence. So we're hopeful that as they get more comfortable with that and we get more comfortable with that program will really, really take off for us. We rolled out our body camera program in August of this last year, and that's been a huge benefit for us. One, I think it will really knock down complaints. We haven't been a full year into the program yet, so we haven't really compared the data on complaints versus before or after body cam, but we will after we've had those in place for about a year. But one of the areas that is really helpful that it has already benefited us is in court. Because now the officer goes in there with the body camera video, and the prosecutors have access to that. So you have a homicide scene or something like that, the prosecutors can look at it and see exactly what we saw. And then you don't have anything lost in translation of the written word or oral testimony. They've seen the same thing we saw. And so we've actually had some good convictions in court based on our body cameras. We expanded our K9 unit last year. If you remember the year before, we did a big fundraising initiative. We went from 2 dogs to 4 dogs. We added the 2 extra dogs earlier this year. And that's been a really huge benefit for us because we run 4 shifts. And so now we have a dog on every shift as opposed to only having a dog 50% of the time on the streets. Now we've got one out there 100% of the time. And they're really helping us make drug arrests and getting into vehicles because the dogs can smell the drugs on the vehicles, or if we've got to track somebody, we've got the dog already out on the street and not having to call a handler that's at home at night and waking him up and losing all that time to get them out there to help us with that. Something that we started many years ago, but we kind of hit a little bit of a milestone with is our crisis intervention team. And that's dealing with people who have mental health issues. That's a very prevalent thing that we deal with as first responders every single day. And so we've been training our staff in crisis intervention. It's a 40-hour course that they have to take, which you can imagine trying to get our cops through a full week of classes is kind of a daunting thing. So we, over years, we've been growing that program, but about 75% of our officers have that training now. And so that helps us identify people that might be in mental health crisis and maybe even identify what specific crisis they're in. I mean, we're by no stretch psychologists or counselors, but at least we have a better understanding through this training. And then that helps us with getting a counselor in the mix, and we partner with community counseling for that, and getting those people resources so that hopefully they don't become repeat customers for us over and over and over again, but we're getting them directed to where they need to be to get the mental health care that they need. And then in December of this last year, we partnered with St. Francis and opened up a little mini substation right outside the emergency room. It was something that they came to us and said, we'd like to do this if you're amiable to it. And we're like, absolutely. And so the benefit to that is we've got officers in the hospital. They're working an assault and the patient's there. They're working a traffic accident where one of the people involved had to go to the hospital, or any number of things that end up with somebody at the hospital. The officers have got a room that they can slide off into. And if they need to interview somebody in that room, they can take them off into a private area instead of interviewing them right in the emergency room. If they need to knock out a report real quick, they can do that there. But it's also open to the officers that work that district outside of just being at a hospital-specific function. If they're, say, working shoplifting on Seamers and they need to do a report and will come in and grab a cup of coffee and have a warm place to do a report, they can go into that room there at St. Francis and do that. So it is a substation, although we don't man it or staff it 24/7, but it's a place that we can have a presence when we need to and when it benefits both us and the hospital. And then we did a lot of community engagement, mostly things that we've been doing throughout the years, but we've continued to do with, we still got our Tip 411 app where people can text us anonymous tips. We've got our anonymous tip line. We still do our neighborhood roll calls in the summer. It's hard to get people out of their houses when it's snowing and 20 degrees, so we don't do them during the winter time. But we still do our coffee with cops. Every year we still do our citizen police experience. I know some of you have been through that. I won't call out which ones of you have been shot at those things, but some of you have even been shot at those. And seen what it is like to be in the role of a police officer. We also do Leadership Cape with, in conjunction with the Cape Chamber of Commerce, where one of their Leadership Cape days, they spend half a day at the fire station. Then they spend the afternoon with us and learning a lot about what police do and learning about our roles in the community and even our roles as it applies to economic development. And so we've always found that to be a really successful program and really engaging with the future leaders of our community. And then, of course, everything is on social media now. And our social media coordinator, Sarah, who's also my assistant, actually does more social media stuff than she does assistant stuff for me anymore. Because that's such a big full-time job, but we're up to over 17,000 followers, and it's one of the best ways that we have of getting information out to our public, and they do a fantastic job with that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Corporal Couch to talk a little bit about crime-free multi-housing and our chronic nuisance program.
Thanks, Chief.
Hello, I'm Richard Couch with the U.S. Postal Service. I always say that in case you're not paying attention. I am the community service officer. If you haven't met me, my job is to build relationships and solve problems within the community. And one of the tasks that I was presented with by Chief Blair back last year was the crime-free multi-housing program. This program was implemented back in 1992 in Mesa, Arizona by Tim Ziering, a police officer that saw that there was a disconnect between property owners, criminals, and the police. And the criminals or the property owners thought that it was the police's job to fix the problem on their property, and the police thought it was the property owner's problem to fix their job, to fix their property. So he created this program. It's been highly successful in bigger cities, and we implemented it in our city. Back in October of last year, we had over 31 property owners attend the workshop, and the workshop is simply letting them know what our role is, what your role as a property owner is, and how to successfully screen those tenants with the legislation that's on the books today, and to do that in an honest and fair manner. And so currently I have about 2 or 3 property owners that have already contacted me and said they're ready to move on to phase 2, which phase 2 is when I go out and do kind of a security assessment of the property, making sure that it's safe and that they've implemented the things that in phase 1 that is required of them. And once that gets done, then they can become a certified crime-free property where they can market themselves as such and use the logo for the crime-free multi-housing system and market themselves on the Chamber's website, on anybody else's website, apartment rental websites and things like that, making them more of an attractive owner and business for prospective tenants. The chronic nuisance property ordinance has been a kind of a partner in this program because we use it a lot. And with the help of Alex and Gary, we meet weekly or monthly as instructed by Mr. Meyer and kind of compare notes. And one of the things that came up on there was the apartment complex at 45 Southwest End. There for a while, we were there about 7 times every night. We almost were going to call that a substation because we were there so often. And we began to start asking them to implement some of the processes that the crime-free multi-housing program required of them. Better lighting, restrictive parking. They installed cameras on their own. They have 16 high-definition cameras on the property now. They're fantastic. And we saw a great reduction in that crime. And that's kind of the model we used, because that was really an extensive problem that went from really bad to really good in a very short period of time, just by implementing those processes. And I can't say enough good things about our property owners in the city, that how receptive they were to this program. We introduced it, and I was trying to come up with a date where everyone could show up and be a part of it. And I actually now have a waiting list, and people are calling me saying, when's the next workshop? And so as soon as we can get some push through phase 2, then yes, I'm going to have another workshop, hopefully sometime in spring. We'll see how many show up for that. One of the things that we piggybacked off of this crime-free multi-housing program was the crime-free hotel motel program. And the other day, we had about 4 attendees to that meeting. Mr. Meyer attended that meeting, and that was a really good, positive gathering for, it's very similar to the crime-free multi-housing in that same process, same certification issues, except it's just a hotel motel. And so once they complete that final phase, then they can post a sign on their property to say, hey, we're a crime-free hotel motel because we've done the check marks and reached the criteria to attain that status. And so really excited about that as well. So I think we're making great strides in our community policing end of the spectrum. Any questions?
I don't know if I have any questions. That's more of a statement. I know that, well, outside of crime in general dropping, I'm very happy that you've seen good results with our property owners. Not always is it easy in dealing with, the nuisance problem, the crime problem, and then you've got a property owner. And so, and I've heard the same thing. The guys like Jason Coulter and Joe Yazoro have complimented how you've handled the whole process, and I've enjoyed working with you. So thank you.
That's what I get paid the big bucks. Thank you.
And just to give you an example of what I think will be a success for our crime-free, just recently, our tactical team served a search warrant on a drug house, got a lot of narcotics and guns out of the house. The landlord showed up in our station very upset with me because we did that and damaged the house in doing that. And I was not making a whole lot of headway with the landlord. I was maybe less sympathetic than Corporal Couch, who came in and steered that landlord towards our crime-free housing program. And I think that we'll pick up another good landlord out of that one, because there was a good education session that went on there. So kudos to Couch. That's pretty much how we operate. I make everybody mad, then I bring him in, and they all like him. So. Probably not. Probably not. So all of that was 2018. So 2019, we're just going to coast and relax. We worked really hard last year. No. So we've got some things that are coming up this year. One of the things that we're hoping to do is expand our Watch on Wheels program. We've had some preliminary conversations with Stan about incorporating some of our public works folks in that, getting them trained up on it. And we'll be reaching out to some of the other businesses and utilities in our town that have people out on the street all the time, because the more eyes that we have in our virtual neighborhood watch, or what we like to call a rolling watch or watch on wheels, the better and safer our community will be. It's not that we're asking them to go out and engage with criminals. We don't want that. We want to keep them safe. But we want, if they see something, to contact us about it. And we want them to be educated on what is something that's suspicious. And so we're going to try to push that out to more people this next year. Another thing that we're doing that will probably happen within about the next month is we're opening up a small substation on the South Spring and Morgan Oak. If you're familiar with that intersection there's community counseling has rented that building, and SNAP was in that building, and now they've rebranded and calling it, I believe, Connection. But we're going to have some space in there. We'll have some lettering on the side of the building that says it's ours with them, and it's kind of a joint project. One of the really neat things about that is they're going to be doing what they say are a lot of kid programs in that facility. And so for us to be in there and mingle with the youth is going to be, I think, a really great thing. Another added benefit to that is sometimes people want to talk to the police, but they don't necessarily want us coming to their house, and they don't want to come all the way to the police station. But this gives just another place in the community that they can slide in there and we can have those conversations, and they feel comfortable doing so. So we're really excited about that. We've had a couple of meetings with community counseling about getting the ball rolling on that. We're just waiting on a few things, door locks, different things like that to allow us to have access. But hopefully within the next month, you'll see us have that presence there. So really excited about that. The other thing we're really working on this year is our CAD and our RMS system in 911. CAD is our computer-aided dispatch system. RMS is our records management system. They're both end of life. But fortunately, the sheriff, because we all share the same system, the sheriff was able to find a grant to purchase that stuff. So by November, December of this year, that should all be fully implemented, as well as the new 911 software upgrade, which y'all approved funding for in the last meeting. We went with one single vendor for all those after we did all of our due diligence and our quotes and stuff. And we think that's going to be the best fit for us, because now you don't have vendors pointing at each other when one thing doesn't integrate with the other. It's all the same vendor. So we're really excited about that. And it's going to be, it's really going to improve our ability to dive down into our records some, plus our dispatch, and then even increase the ability of people to be able to contact us on 911, where we were at the end of life, and really starting to kind of cripple along on the softwares that we had. And then the final thing, which you've heard quite a bit about, is our radio interoperability program. That's still rolling along, and I believe, Molly and I talked earlier, we should have some towers possibly starting to go up towards the end of the year. And so that project's still going. That one won't be completed in this year, but we will be well on our way to that, getting that done. So with that, I talked fast and talked a lot. Does anybody have any questions?
Overall, good report.
Thank you,
Good.
sir.
See any, I know in the past we talked about trends of the violent crime and who was committing. Can you talk about that? Those trends, are they changing?
Yeah, the trends, with our homicides this last year, that was definitely a significant difference in the trends. We had 6 homicides, and most of our homicides in the past have either been related to the drug trade or related to a feeling of disrespect by somebody else within the community. And we still did have 3 homicides that fit that nexus. And then we had 3 homicides that were just totally outliers, more domestic related situations. And then the unfortunate dog mauling, which counts statistically as a homicide since we made an arrest on that one. So in that aspect, yes, we have seen a little bit of a difference. As far as the robberies and the regular assaults and stuff, it still seems to revolve around either drug trade or just a lack of respect for each other. And I always liken it to in the days when we were growing up, if you had a beef with somebody, you just went out in the parking lot after school and you had a fist fight, and then it was over and y'all were buddies probably 2 weeks later. And that's just not the society or the environment that we live in now, that people seem to want to go to a gun a lot quicker to settle those disputes, unfortunately. Anybody else?
I know that this is my 3rd year, and that's pretty significant, really, considering where we were in 2016. When we saw those numbers in 2016, and I kind of always used to saying that if you're getting better an inch, some days you're going to get better an inch, some days you're going to get better a foot, and I would consider that to significant.
Well, it's good to see it over a 5-year period too, because it gives you a broader aspect of where things are going, and that's good. That's a good thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the things that I think I've observed and really just kind of sitting back and watching this today is the fact that how strategic everything is being done, and how planned it is to address certain things. So you got patrols that are directed because of data. You have picked out and said, okay, well, we have a problem with people coming into our community, so let's work with landlords and motels and and let's do that. And let's reach out to the community and get them to talk to us more. And so all those things come together to do such a great deal. And what I'm really excited about is this CAD RMS thing, because we're able to do all this with it's pretty marginal data that we have now. Once we get this other data, they're going to be able to really pinpoint dates, times, days of the week, all sorts of things like that to help even refine that more and be better with our directed patrols, be better with our events, our regional events and the street crimes task force. All those things even get better with that better data. So really exciting, and congratulations, Chief. Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, we'll move on to communications and reports. Any council got anything to report?
I've just got one, and that was the daddy-daughter dance on Saturday. It's amazing that all the staff that helps out with that. I mean, Penny and
Well, how many people are there?
I was ticket number 507, and there had to have been 700, 800 people there.
You've got that many people.
Was there over 1,000? Okay.
You gotta have.
It was just amazing. I mean, it was a great time, and all of the staff that helps out and everything. It was a really good time. My daughter enjoyed it thoroughly. I mean, not that I didn't.
Anybody else? Nope. I've been out of town, so I really don't have anything to report either. I have to mention that a week from Wednesday on the 27th is Noon Optimist Chili Day. And I'll be in there all day cooking chili, so you're welcome to come out and have a bowl of chili. And if you're really gutsy, you'll have the hot stuff and sweat. But it's a good day to raise money. Scott, anything?
I do have a couple things. I did go to the legislative conference, the MML legislative conference. A lot of stuff going on with our legislature. One of the things that is gaining a lot of statewide attention is the Better Together issue in St. Louis. And while you feel like that might not affect you, it may, because they're starting in St. Louis, and what then keeps them from eventually coming and saying, well, we think all counties should consolidate this way. But certainly a lot of discussion about that, and one that while didn't find ourselves engaged in it a whole lot, one to keep an eye on, because it speaks to local control. They're telling municipalities in St. Louis County that we're going to take everything away from you except for zoning and parks, basically is what they're saying. And, oh, by the way, you get to vote on it, but so does the whole state. And how the whole state votes is determined whether that's going to happen to you. So not only are we taking local control away from municipalities, it's being done when a bunch of people who aren't going to be affected by it at all are going to be those that get to vote on it. So it's it doesn't, and certainly one that bids keeping an eye on. We did talk a little bit about the Wayfair decision. There are several bills coming through the legislature looking at that from some different angles, and engaged on that quite a bit. Talked with our Senate and House representatives about that, and how important that is to us. There's several bills about municipal court, about failure to appear. There's actually looking at an idea of bringing some of the nuisance and other ordinance violations into civil court as an option. So that's kind of an interesting way to resolve it, but maybe there's some possibilities there. If they're not going to allow it to work in municipal court, then maybe civil court's the way to go. But that's, again, something for us to watch. There's some franchise fee changes that also take away some of the local control. Sales tax caps that would put a total tax on sales tax at various places, low as I believe 8%, as high as 12%, would cap sales tax. Again, that's pulling away from local control. Those probably don't particularly
hurt us at this point because we aren't near those limits. But when they start limiting, all that matters is moving it down a little bit. The transportation bonds, there is a bill that would issue $350 million worth of bonds that would build bridges all across the state. They're all bridges that are in the current 5-year STIP. That would then free up that money to allow MoDOT to program transportation projects to come back and backfill that within that 5 years. They made a point that this isn't a cure for the transportation infrastructure lack of funding, but it's a Band-Aid maybe that can go for a few years and help things out from that perspective. And seems like a pretty good approach given the fact that the measure was defeated in the last election. There's some things about public water systems that are concerning. We are certainly concerned about those and keeping an eye on those. I mentioned those to our senator. And then other small things that we are keeping an eye on as well. The other meeting I was at was at the home dock cities. This is the cities who have a casino in their city, and we have an organization that we meet and discuss. Some concern about a couple of things. One of them is the what they call video lottery. Video lottery is essentially a slot machine, but they count it as video lottery because that way it can be less regulated and you can put it anywhere and the state collects all the money. So there is certainly concern, and we're certainly concerned about that. We've done a lot of discussion about it, but it's really concerning because of its unregulation. These would be issued any place where there's a liquor license. So if you can imagine your truck stop or your convenience store with one person at the counter who's trying to take money for gas, sell groceries, do everything else. Also keep an eye on those 4 machines over there. Make sure that the people using them are 21 and that they are doing that legally and credibly. It's unlikely to happen. So that's a big concern. And then sports betting is another thing that is being discussed. Kind of interesting about sports betting. One of the things they talked about with that was there's an integrity fee apparently that has been proposed that would send 2 to 3%. I can't remember if it's about 2%, I think, to the owners of the Major League Baseball and the National Football League, and that would be because they would supply the statistics from which people could vote or could place their bets from. So that would be statistics that would have integrity to them, and so that was their play for that. And I thought it was interesting that Missourians would then continue to give cash to Stan Kroenke as he moved his LA Rams or St. Louis Rams to LA. And I don't think that sounds like a good idea. But
Doesn't to those in St. Louis.
no, it certainly doesn't to those in St. Louis. So it was a good meeting, and we're going to continue to keep a real close eye because these issues are several of them very impactful to us, and we'll keep you informed. I do envision potentially going back to Jeff City should some of these get a little more prominent. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Any questions? If not, we'll move right into the Planning and Zoning Committee report.
Good evening.
I see Mr. Glenn's off gallivanting around somewhere.
Yes, we're deciding whether we're going to fire him or not. But in the meantime, it was a very short commission meeting. There's only 2 items that are on your agenda for tonight. One has to do with driveways. Both of these are amendments to the code. One of these has to do proposed amendments to the code. One has to do with driveways and driveway spacing. The specific things that it does is it allows the current code to be updated to be more scalable, which makes it a little more flexible for our property owners. It also removes the cap and allows, particularly for businesses, to have multiple driveways on a non-residential street. So this one is, I think, the commission unanimously approved it, an improvement to the code to make it more flexible for property owners. The second one, which I want to use the word excited, but you can't get excited about code issues, is the signage. In all the years I've been on planning and zoning, the most common thing we see, obviously, among the most common things are people requesting to move some of their signage from the front to the side of their building. Think Emos, Harbor Freight, Krispy Kreme, That will now be part of the code should that pass council. And the staff's put together a proposal that would allow a property owner to then look at the code and have that move to their non-street side of their building without having to come for the commission and the council. And so that again makes it more flexible for our business owners specifically without having to spend a Wednesday night for 120 seconds only to be told yes and then wait for council to act. So commission approved that as well unanimously and both come with unanimous recommendation for the council.
Thank you. That's, just another way we're working, and our staff is working to streamline some of the codes and development to make it easier for developers not to have to come before you all and have a variance and then come back to us. So it's just two more things that will make things easier.
Sign will be the
Big one.
That's a big one for
Yeah.
lots of our businesses.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Nope. Thanks. Appreciate it. Are there any appearances this evening regarding any item that's not listed on the agenda? Any appearances for any item not listed on the agenda? If not, we'll move right into the agenda review. Scott?
Very good. We have one public hearing tonight. This will be the public hearing for the 2019-2024 capital improvement program. We continue to get input, received input from this council last time. Tonight will be an open public hearing and continue to have input, and eager to hear if council has any additional input as well tonight. So that will be our only public hearing. We do have on the consent agenda 2 items from last time: the second and third reading of the record plat for the locks at Dalhousie, and the second and third reading of the small cell ordinance. Number 5 is the historic resource survey we do at Southeast Missouri State University. We have a great partnership with them. They do this every year. I believe there's 2 areas designated in here. One of them is along Big Bend to Sprague, next right where the university is. It's kind of a continuation. And the other one is over by Jefferson School. So a couple of good areas to have the survey done on. Number 6 is the agreement for KT Power Systems. This is several areas where LED streetlights conversions will happen, and this will help save us money. This was part of TTF 5, identified areas where we can go in and update these and save us not only on the upgoing power, but also on replacements. They don't have to be replaced near as often. Those bulbs are expensive. Somebody was telling me the other day that one bulb on some mercury vapor is only $50 a piece. So that's a savings as well. Number 6 is, excuse me, that was number 6. Go ahead.
No.
Number 7 is a special use permit. This is transfer of ownership on 1900 North Kings Highway. They have a RV lot that they are selling, and but they want to continue the special use. That's worked out really well, that location, and so recommend approval of that one. And then partial release of the performance bond for Collins Mill. Any questions on the consent agenda or items you need to abstain from?
I need to abstain from number 7 and number 8, financial conflict of interest.
Okay. New ordinances. Now we have number 9 is reimbursement for traffic signal repairs at William and Southwest End Boulevard. This is a location that in 2011 was hit by lightning during a storm, and we are now getting reimbursed because now the ER funds are finally available. So the same thing with number 10. This is repairs to South Sprague Street that were done in 2011 that the ER funds are now available with the Department of Transportation. So it's those reimbursements.
Took 7 years.
They declare an emergency, and then it just takes a long time for all those things to get funded. It's crazy.
Yep.
I think we're slow sometimes. It's
I understand.
Number 11, number 12 are the streamlining things we talked about that that Dr. Skinner talked about. So we're excited about those things, and we'll have some additional things. We continue to work through that list. Methodical in doing so, but I know there'll be some more coming in the next throughout this year. We have one appointment tonight. I believe it's a mayor's appointment to the University of Missouri Extension Council.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Any questions about the agenda? If not, I will call our regular session to order and we'll have the roll call.
Ryan Essex is absent. Bob Fox.
Here.
Robbie Guard. Here. Victor Gunn. Here. Stacy Kinder.
Here.
Shelley Moore. Dan Preston is also absent.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Guard, second by Shelley. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now open a public hearing on the 2019 to 2024 Capital Improvement Program. Anybody here to have any comments, any questions about the 2019 to 2024 Capital Improvement Program? We discussed this pretty well at length in our last meeting. Council came up with several questions, I think, that were addressed, and that we would like to see water projects prioritized as to their importance. Same thing with streets. Shortly after this upcoming election in April, we will activate the TTF-6 committee again and begin that process with the streets, looking at those that were addressed in TTF-5 and not taken care of, and any other new ones that have come up, and any of the issues in this 5-year plan. That committee will look at those and bring them out to the community, get community input, and have more public hearings. And it's a process that's worked well 5 times, and I think it's been a big boon to Cape Girardeau. I know that one of the complaints that we as council members and as a mayor hear every week is this pothole in this street, and this street, and this street. And I assure you that we are making efforts, and we'll make efforts in TTF-6 and other ways to increase the asphalt repaving, the concrete paving, and address neighborhood streets, and do so in on a much bigger scale to address those. So we hear you, and we're going to react to it. Any other comments?
One thing I told people is that whenever Stan and his group came in and our grade was an 83, I've made it very clear that an 83 might be labeled as fine, but we want to do more. I mean, we want a better grade than an 83. I think you'll see TTF-6 projects will reflect that.
Yep. I think so too. That process will start in a couple of months. Any other comments? If not, no other comments from the public, we will close the public hearing. And I will ask, is there anybody here tonight to make comments about any item that is on the agenda this evening? Any comments about any item on the agenda this evening? If not, we will move on to the consent agenda. Eric?
Over 19-23, an ordinance approving record plat of the Locks of Dalhousie Phase 5, and ordinance approving record plat of the Locks of Dalhousie Phase 5. Over 19-28, an ordinance amending Chapter 24 of the Code of Ordinances, City of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, by adding a new Article 6 relating to regulation of public rights of way. An ordinance amending Chapter 24 of the Code of Ordinances, City of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, by adding a new Article 6 relating to regulation of public rights of way. Number 19-29, a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Southeast Missouri State University to prepare an historic research survey in the city of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Number 19-32, a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with KT Power Systems, Inc. for the 2019 LED streetlight conversion project in the city of Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
You have before you the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion. Moved by Shelley. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Robbie. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. Consent agenda passes. We have 4 new ordinances this evening. The first is Bill number 19-30, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for traffic signal repairs at William Street and Southwest End Boulevard in the city of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Moved by Robbie. Do I hear a second by Victor? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Bill number 19-31, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for repair of South Sprigg Street in the city of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Moved by Shelley. Second by Stacy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Bill number 19-33, an ordinance amending chapter 25 of the Code of Ordinances in the city of Cape Girardeau, Missouri regarding signs.
So moved.
Moved by Robbie. Second by Shelley. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Bill number 19-34, an ordinance amending chapter 25 of the Code of Ordinances in the city of Cape Girardeau, Missouri regarding driveway spacing requirements. Moved by Victor. Seconded by Stacy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have one appointment this evening to the University of Murray Extension Council, and that is a reappointment of Russell Humphrey. I'll entertain a motion. Moved by Victor, seconded by Robbie. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We have no closed session this evening, so I'll entertain a motion, we adjourn.
So moved. Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.